Hey, welcome back to another edition of the Friday Show, brought to you this week by Rowayton, son of Into Mischief, standing at Diamond Bee Farms in Pennsylvania. I'm Ray Paulick, joined today by Natalie Voss, the editor-in-chief of the Paulick Report. And Natalie, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah, so this is an anniversary, sort of. It was a year ago on Monday morning. I remember my phone started buzzing very early that morning with rumors of arrests of trainers in New York and Florida. It was the biggest story that we had come across in a long time. And just a few days later, we even had a bigger story. The coronavirus was called a pandemic by the World Health Organization. Racing ground to a halt, and a lot of the steam seemed to be taken away from this Southern District of New York FBI investigation into horse racing. Here we are a year later. It seems like an appropriate time to get caught up a little bit on where things stand. And let's start with the timeline. It's been a year. What are some of the things that have happened in the last year? And as a lot of readers say, when is this thing going to go to trial? Everybody's anxious to find out how it's going to end.
Yeah, so I wrote about a status conference update in this case, I think back in November. And I want to say I made the headline something like, get comfortable if you're waiting for a conclusion on this. It's a particularly complicated case because it's a federal case, and there were originally 27 different defendants across all of the indictments that came out on that day in March. So it's not made probably as much progress as people would have liked. So at this point, we had 27 defendants originally between the various indictments that came out that day. We've had 2 guilty pleas entered, and we've had 1 person where they have chosen to defer prosecution. There was a superseding indictment that came out late last year, which therefore kind of takes the place of the original indictment. There were some people who were not on the superseding who were on the original. We don't know yet if they have taken deals or are in the process of brokering deals to plead guilty. There were 5 people, who were not carried over to the superseding. It's a little difficult to get updates in this case also because a lot of the documents in the public file that we can access as media are still under seal because the investigation continues. There have been hints at eventual, additional indictments, and therefore, I can see when something gets entered, but I can't access what it is. I don't even get a description of what it is. So I'm a little bit limited in what I can do here.
Yeah, even this week with the sentencing of Scott Robinson, who I guess was a supplier of performance-enhancing substances. Even in that sentencing, there were some things that were redacted. So this is going to go on for a while. I know that the Penn National FBI investigation from some years ago, it took over 5 years from the original indictments until I think the final case was closed and sentencing was done. So, like you said, strap in, it's going to be a while. The other question that everybody wants to know is, will there be more indictments, and will it expand outside of the main states where it's been, which is Florida, New York, and I guess maybe some of the other Northeast regions? Could the Southern District of New York, for example, do something in Kentucky or California or somewhere else?
Yeah, so we get this question a lot, and there has not been anything as of yet. Just sort of, as a pause on that question for a moment, we get asked a lot, like, do you know who's on the next indictment? Has there been another indictment? We get a lot of reader emails like, have you done a story about this? Why haven't you done a story about this? Do you know the answer to this? And I just sort of want to take a moment to direct people to, there's this little bar in the red bar above my head here. At the very top of the page, there's a search bar that will allow you to go through our archives. So if you're thinking of emailing us and asking, have you written about so-and-so? You can look and see if we've written about it. And if we know the answer to an important question like who's on the next indictment, we will probably have written a story about that. Otherwise, we probably don't know. I do know that the COVID protocols backed things up considerably for a lot of different investigations and court proceedings, both federal and state, through last year. We were kind of getting a lot of hints from, particularly from the Jockey Club, that there were supposed to be more indictments coming. The Jockey Club, of course, was involved in hiring a private investigation firm to work on gathering the evidence for this case. And they say there should be more. However, I know that in the Southern District of New York, they were not able to convene grand juries for quite a period of time last year. I think that it was maybe towards the fall before they finally were able to start getting people together in a room for a grand jury, because a grand jury, of course, involves more people than a typical jury, unlike a criminal or civil trial. So they would have to have a grand jury indict someone before they could go out and arrest them, before any indictment or similar sort of documents would become official, would become public. So I think that that is supposed to have held them up quite a bit. I think there were also probably some additional protocols or concerns about arresting people in the time of COVID, because obviously there's a lot of close personal contact happening there. So we keep hearing that there are more coming. We don't have any idea if there still are, where they might be. But it's possible still, I think, just because there was that, major holdup for a lot of last year.
One of the things we learned with the sentencing of Scott Robinson this week is that he was fined $100, but he also had to pay to the government something like $3.6 million of receipts from his sales of these products, the adulterated, misbranded products. That would suggest that there's a fairly lengthy customer list. Where do we go? Where does the government go? Where do state racing commissions go if there is a customer list that has the names of some very prominent people on it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to know the answer to that probably for, I would guess, literally years, because, that will be part of the investigation file. They're not going to say that that's subject to public record request by either a state racing commission, by media, by anyone, until the case is completely over with for all of the defendants involved. I would imagine that they probably did get customer lists as part of the FBI's investigation. The defendants have already made much of the fact that there is such a large amount of data that's been turned over to them by the prosecutors that was taken as part of the FBI's investigation. Literally hundreds of thousands of files, terabytes of data. I'm sure somewhere in there are customer lists, but we're not going to know what they say. The other thing is, if we learned anything from the original indictment, it was that, people who were buying these products are sometimes smart enough not to have them shipped to themselves under their own name at the racetrack. So even if you had that customer list, I'm not sure how comprehensive it would be. I'm not sure if you would have fake names on there, if you'd have, sort of dummy addresses where someone could pick something up. So, if we do end up getting this document, I'm not sure what commissions or, the new federal authority might be able to do with it, because I'm not sure how helpful it'll be. I'm sure it'll have some really illuminating information on it from a public interest standpoint, but it's sort of unclear to me how they would maybe enforce rule violations based on that list, because we just don't know yet what's on there.
Yeah, getting back to the discovery or the evidence that the government now has, the stuff they've confiscated, multiple hard drives, cell phones, intercepted phone conversations with some of the defendants. There's a lot to go through. I know that originally, I believe they said they needed at least 6 months, the government did, to go through everything. And I think they probably blew past that deadline and hadn't finished. And that's before I think it goes to the defense. So there's an awful lot for both sides to go through before this can ever get close to a trial.
Right. And, in November, the status conference was partially sort of based on how do we set out a schedule for what happens next. They didn't even set a trial date at that point, because they have to, I'm learning from following this case, they have to set certain timeframes for, okay, the government have to turn over the files we have to the defense so that they know what they're dealing with. Then they have a certain amount of time to file motions, including motions to dismiss, motions to exclude information. Several of the defendants already have filed a motion to dismiss, which is to be expected. Then there's a time frame for the government to respond. Then there's a time frame for replies. There's a lot of different kind of stages that have to be gone through before they can even begin discussing a trial. But I think that they were meant to have had an additional sort of update conference. I think it was in February originally, and it's been pushed back 90 days because there continues to be such a volume of evidence going from the government to the defense. The defense has talked a lot about this is really burdensome. It's taking us so much time. And I can tell you, like, transcripts are an enormous amount of time to read through. When I get something as part of one of the much smaller investigations that I do, you don't really think about like how long a transcript of a conversation or testimony or whatever ends up being, how many pages that ends up being until you're reading through it. And chances are you have to read it more than once because you have to see what you've got and then go back and see what's relevant. So it really is taking them a long time. The government's position is we would rather give you everything early and give you everything that we have so there's no surprises later. But that sort of continues to be a problem, I think, for all sides.
As far as the defense is concerned, the only inkling I've gotten for a defense strategy is comments that, well, these substances, SGF 1000 being one of the examples of some sort of a supplement, there's nothing in them that's illegal. But I'm reminded of going back to Penn National, the Penn National case. A trainer named Murray Rojas was convicted on misbranding, and all of the substances that she gave to horses, or that she directed to be given to horses, were therapeutic medications that were not necessarily illegal, but they were illegally given on race day according to the conviction. So I'm not so sure that defense is going to work if the government has proof that things were given on race day.
Well, I think the government's interest is primarily initially, were these drugs misbranded and adulterated? And that comes down to how they were made and how they were labeled. From the example pictures that we've seen in the indictments, those were not FDA approved, mass produced sort of typical prescription drugs. From the information that I have when I'm looking at substances in the course of my research, those were not FDA approved. Those seem like they could be getting pretty easily into the territory, just in terms of looking at them, of misbranded, adulterated. I don't know that the government has to prove that they impacted the outcome of a race because they're not being charged with race fixing. I think that they are mostly interested in the labeling of these drugs and the sale of these drugs. They have sort of outlined the racing commissions and the racing industry as a victim of the crime of adulteration and misbranding because these were substances used on racehorses. But I'm not sure that they're all that concerned with whether or not it impacted races. I think that there's also in the superseding indictment a charge of mail fraud, and I think that was related to modifying records, billing records that went to owners to try to hide these administrations. Again, if they can show they altered the records, I don't think they're all that concerned about did this actually impact a race or not.
Yeah. Well, for sure, there's going to be more to be revealed. I would urge everybody who hasn't read Natalie's commentary this week entitled, "I Love Horses Only Takes You So Far." It gets into a little bit of the sentencing of Scott Robinson and also just the mentality of the industry and how it reacts when terrible things happen. So I'd urge everybody to read that. Natalie, thanks for your reporting on this. Thanks for being with us. And right now, as promised, we're going to hear from Glenn Brock to talk a little bit about Rowayton, son of Into Mischief, the only son of Into Mischief standing in Pennsylvania. We'll be right back after this.
We have a new horse, Rowayton, that we're very excited about. He's an Into Mischief out of an Indian Charlie mare. He was second to Game Winner in the Del Mar Futurity, narrowly beaten, and Game Winner, of course, went on to be the champion 2-year-old that year. He was 2/10 off the track record at Belmont, and just a very, very useful. In that race, he came from off the pace. Other races, he showed speed and was on the lead. I love the influence of the Indian Charlie. Into Mischief is the hottest sire in the country, and he's owned by an organization that's going to support him with not only with mares, but supporting the industry by buying a lot of nice horses, and that's OXO Larry Best.
All right. Well, thanks to Glenn Brock and to Larry Best of OXO Equine that owns Rowayton. I'm joined now by Joe Nevills, Bloodstock editor of the Paulick Report. And speaking of Sons of Into Mischief, which is Rowayton, our star of the week this week is another son of Into Mischief.
A quarter of a mile to go, and Life is Good has a 3.5 length lead. No one's coming close. Dream Shake on the inside, then Medina Spirit and the Great One, top of the stretch. Life is Good, 4-length lead. Now it's 5, and it's all Life is Good. He's passing this test with flying colors. Life is Good, unbeaten and untested as he rocks in the San Felipe. Wins by about 8.
All right, Joe, can we throw out the questions about Sons of Into Mischief getting the distance, do you think?
I think they're going to be just fine. I think that's, it's funny. I was actually talking to Spendthrift's general manager, Ned Toffee, the other day, and he was saying that, Into Mischief has been breeding better and better books of mares every year as its stock has risen. And you're seeing that on the racetrack that, they're getting more and more proven at, 2-turn distances, classic distances, get comfy. You're going to be seeing a lot of this in the next several years.
So this horse was bet down to 2-1 in the Kentucky Derby future wager, the last pool, and when we just had the lowest ever in March. Are we looking at a heavy favorite for the Derby if he puts in a similar kind of performance in the Santa Anita Derby next time?
If he wins the Santa Anita Derby the same way he's won every race before, it's going to be hard to find someone to put up against him. He runs with this sort of full-out abandon, just straight from the gate. He sets electric flat fractions every time, and it seems like he's still running with the same energy, with the same fury, coming into this final stretch that, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, he's got, unless he breaks poorly or something, he's just got too much speed for anybody to keep up with him early. And the stamina that he showed, at least in the San Felipe, it's going to be hard to close on him. So,
and that's going to be the question is, so far, he hasn't gotten that much of true pressure on the lead. And it makes me wonder if someone's going to try to, send a rabbit after him at some point and try and tucker him out a little bit and see if he still has that extra bit in the tank to, kick on in the stretch like he has before. If that's, staring someone in the eye is going to be enough to slow him down enough to bring up the Dream Shakes, to bring up the Medina Spirits, to really challenge them in the last bit of stretch. So far, we haven't seen that yet. The Santa Anita Derby is going to be the next shot to see if someone has the winning formula against him. But so far, everyone's coming up empty.
Well, and in the Kentucky Derby, since they went to the point system, you don't get those early speed 2-year-olds that, won enough money as a 2-year-old to get into the Derby field. Now you've got to win the 2-turn races to get in, and you're just not getting those, for lack of a better term, cheap speed horses in there anymore.
Yeah, and that's played out in the Kentucky Derby, too. It seems like a lot of the recent winners, or at least the first horses past the wire, have been ones that run a lot like Life is Good. They get on the lead early, they set their cruising speed, they get into cruise control, and then they have that little extra to kick on in the end, and the clean horse gets his picture taken at the end of the day. There haven't been a whole lot of horses that have been able to successfully close for the win spot, obviously second, third, get a check. But for that win spot, it seems to be a lot of horses that can get on the front and stay out of trouble. And so far, so good for Life is Good doing that.
All right. Well, it's time for a toast to Vino Rosso. Joe, I understand that he's a little bit like Doritos. He's just going to keep making more babies. Let's take a look at one this week.
Yes. So over the past few weeks, we've seen just how well Vino Rosso has stamped his first foals. And we've got another fine example here. This time around, we've got a colt out of the winning pulpit mare War Relic, bred in Kentucky by Elm Tree Farm. I called Elm Tree's Jody Huckabee, and he's a big believer in this stallion. They've got 2 already on the ground this season and 3 more coming, and they're so happy with what they've seen so far, they've already bought a few more seasons of Vino Rosso. Now, Jody said that he relies heavily on physical matches when it comes to his matings, and that having a good amount of leg in a young horse is how you get attention in the commercial arena. Vino Rosso himself is a very leggy son of Curlin, and as we see here, and with the foals in the past weeks, the stallion has made plenty sure that when it comes to a foal with him, that's in the package. And that's our toast to Vino Rosso.
All right. Thanks so much, Joe. Thank you to Spendthrift Farm for their sponsorship, and to Glenn Brock and Larry Best of OXO Week 1 Standing Rowayton. We will see you next week on the Friday show. Thanks for joining us.